This conference will now be recorded.
Oh, no. Have any of you gotten pit up around the lake by those no-see-ums or whatever?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Huh?
It looks like a farmer's.
Well, we're just waiting
It
for
is.
John, Megan.
I don't dare to go around with my shirt off anymore.
This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the July meeting of the Finance Committee and of the full board. For members of the public attending remotely, we ask that you please close other programs on your computer or phone, silence your cell phone, and mute your audio when not speaking. Agendas for today's meeting are available at hrbrrd.ny.gov under board meetings. The conference organizer will monitor the program's chat function for anyone wishing to address the board during the public comment period during the meeting of the full board. For anyone wishing to address the board, kindly use the chat function or email brao@hrbrrd.ny.gov, or simply speak up during the public comment period during the full board meeting. I'll now turn the gavel over to Mr. DeWitt for the Finance Committee meeting, where the first order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to call the July 8th Finance Committee meeting to order. Roll call, Mr. Leslie.
Committee Chair Kenneth DeWitt.
Here.
Committee members Albert Hayes
Here.
and Timothy Reagan.
Here.
Board Chair Mark Finkel.
Here.
Board Member Nicole Allen.
Here.
Board Members Alfred Candido and Richard Bird are both excused. Executive Director John Callahan.
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie present. Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Minichia.
Here.
Chief Engineer Robert Fulton.
Here.
Director of Administrative Services Stephanie Rizzi.
Here.
Everybody's accounted for.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to adopt or revise the meeting agenda?
I will make that motion.
I'll second it.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Can I have a motion to approve the June 10th, 2025 Financial Committee meeting minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I will second that.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Committee meeting, new business. Motion to advance to the full board and recommend adoption of a resolution to authorize reapportions for capital projects. Mr. Russo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can find the reappropriation resolution on page 6 of your packet. You may recall that at previous
There he is.
summer meetings of the last 4 years, we have asked the board to approve use of a budget practice called reappropriation, try to ensure that the regulating district has the authority to spend on capital projects in the needed amounts and accounts. This resolution seeks approval to engage in this reappropriation exercise for the 2025-26 fiscal year. On page 7, you see the amounts we would like to reappropriate and the specific accounts where those changes would take place, totaling $4,394,095. The vast majority, nearly 94%, are in the accounts connected to the Indian Lake Dam Rehabilitation Project. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about this resolution.
I have none.
I do. And I'm just trying to figure out how I want to start it. I don't. I'm trying to put this in words that may not offend anybody, but it probably won't work well. I don't understand where we have a process where we have pre-engineering that we have coming in, which we spend a lot of money for the pre-engineering of doing that. And we go out and we bid a project and we go with the bid. And sometimes, and I know they're not well defined because there's things on these projects that can't be well defined because of the structure and stuff. But I would really like to understand from the contractor when they're bidding on the project, of what are they using as a process to bid on the project? Because everyone we come in quite a bit over after spending a lot of money on engineering. So I kind of wonder, and typically when you lend a contract out, unless there's a change, change in what the thing was, repair the dam, put cement in, do whatever it is. I mean, you signed up for the contract, that's what you get. And you better figure out how to get it done. We seem to keep going beyond, and then we come back in. I just would like to understand, are we missing something? Do we need to have the consultant, the construction consultant that's putting together the original stuff before it goes out to bid, sit down with the bidders and make sure that everybody has got the right detail they need, and they're asking the right amount of questions? And maybe you have that, and we just don't see that. But, I mean, I know a lot of big projects, that's what it is. They come in, there's a sit down with the engineering consultant that's doing the pre-engineering and stuff, and they sit down and there's a lot of dialogue and discussion to try to come up with it. And the reason why I'm asking the questions on this is because as we get into the next big project, which will be our biggest one, I think, when we do that, I just don't know how much longer we can keep going and coming in that much over on projects.
Well, I think I would just, to the extent some of that is teed up for me, Mr. Reagan, and I know we'll have a lot more discussion likely in the board meeting when we're discussing the Indian Lake Amendment. But on that project, for example, the answer is yes, there are questions during the bidding process where contractors, if they seek clarification on an element of design, have the opportunity to ask those questions. Then, as we're going through this process, for instance, with Old Forge and Six Lake, we will issue answers to those questions to all the parties that are interested in bidding. During, obviously, you alluded to it a moment ago. With a large construction project, sometimes conditions on site do change. So that a little bit with Hawkinsville, we've seen that a little bit, obviously with Indian Lake. And then there are times when the bid did not include new work that emerges that you want to accomplish, or you find pursuant to DEC dam safety regulations you need to accomplish that the contractor didn't bid on at all. And that, sort of, again, in keeping with our discussion later today, that's a situation we find ourselves in with the Indian Lake Dam project, for example. But I think the crux of your question, is there a level of interaction in a formal process to ensure that the contractors clearly understand the scope of work being bid and that their bids are accurately reflective of that scope? I think the answer would be yes, and I think certainly Rob Boltan can talk more about that. But that's probably only a partial answer to your question. How do we, I think you asked in the context of the Hawkinsville project, how do we apply any lessons learned here on the Indian Lake Dam project to make sure we've done sufficient engineering on the design side to make sure that we limit the number of surprises, maybe not drive that number of surprises down to zero. But
You're never going to have zero, John.
Yeah,
That's why you have
yeah.
contingency.
Sure.
But I'm going to take it. So the Hawkinsville project, again, I don't have all my notes from that. I'm going on memory. And Rob, if I got something wrong, correct me while I'm going. But one of the first things they started talking about were the weather conditions for November and December. That was the best November and December I can remember up in that area since I've lived there, and I've been there 25 years of going on. But that was the rationale of going on. The weather conditions were bad. Well, they were pretty good compared to normal of going, and there were different things on that all the way through of going through. So I go back to the question, when you have a project like that, a lot of times, what some folks, a lot of people do, is everybody gets together at the site. There is a heck of a discussion. The people are there. The engineering firm that did the work on it is there.
A
And-
mandatory pre-bid site visit, which
And-
we have tomorrow at Old Forge and Sixth Lake.
But that's the question, is that what we've been doing on these other ones? Does that happen?
Except that if I interpret what you're saying correctly, we can't do that and have a design build approach prior to bidding. You're looking, I believe,
And
for a
that's why,
design build. approach.
yes, and why
We
can't you?
cannot, because that's not an opportunity in the state for us to use.
And again, I know, it's just a law, you can't do it that way?
Not right. It's not enough. There is no opportunity for us as an agency to approach a design build, use design build approach for a construction project.
So basically, the person who's designing it can't bid on it, is what you're telling me.
Well, the person who designs it has to be a licensed
Yes,
professional
yeah,
engineer.
understand that.
The
Understand.
contractor does not have to be a licensed professional engineer. So there's a difference there.
And state law is prescriptive on how you obtain both of those services, engineering versus
Well,
contract.
Two different procurement processes.
I'm thinking in 2 years, I don't have to worry about that if I'm still on the board, because we won't have any more major projects like this, I'm guessing, and that'll be fine.
Yeah.
That'll be good with me. But, so I don't want to get into why the state has that law, so I don't want, but again, so what we're saying is that when the engineering firm comes up there and is bidding on the bidding,
The engineering firm isn't bidding on anything.
excuse me, not the engineering firm, the contractual firm,
Yeah.
which in my world was usually an engineering firm. So that's why I use that. So the people that are going to do the contracting coming up there, they don't sit down with the engineer and go into detailed questions about why they did this and why they did that,
They can ask questions
but do that.
based on, well, it's up to them to ask the questions.
But the guy at the
I can't compel
Hunkinson-
them to. They have opportunities to ask questions during the bidding process and in the mandatory pre-bid site visit.
Okay.
If they have questions, they submit them to us, we forward those to the engineer answers them, and that helps them form their bids.
But it's importantly, all of the bidders
It's all
see
bidders.
all of the questions.
All bidders have questions and all bidders have the opportunity. But it's not the design and then the contractor's bid price cannot be manipulated after the award based on, unless we go through a change order or we run into an instance where there's new work that's.
I understand if you do the change
So
order of any
they
type.
can't form their original bid price based on a post-award condition.
Understand that. That's, but making sure that they have a clear understanding
Mhm.
of the work that's required and stuff. Just from a process improvement. And again, maybe in this world, where you're dealing with water and stuff like that, maybe this is very normal of going on to have projects where you spend a lot of money in engineering, an awful lot of money in engineering. I mean, you're spending a ton of money in pre-engineering of getting this thing up. We're spending a lot of going on.
Well, I mean, it's consistent with the size of the construction project.
Again, my experience is it's quite a bit, and I realize there's differences. There's two different worlds. So to me, it's a difference here. But we spend a lot of money in engineering, and we continually have to approve additional money, even with the contingencies and stuff that are built in, that any contract firm worth their money is building good contingencies on these types of projects of going on. That to me says that there's a process improvement that's needed somewhere. I don't understand the state law or anything like that. But I do understand process improvement. And again, I guess what I would ask for, and I don't want to spend everybody's time, I would love to sit down with you and the contractor and the person to design and the contractor and just what can we do to try to improve the process? Not looking to fault or anything like that, just say, is there things that were inside state law that we can do to improve the process that's going forward? You don't need me. I don't need to be involved. I'm glad to, but I don't need to. To me, it's just not acceptable to have that type of thing going on. And again, I'm using my experiences that can be totally wrong from everything else, and you guys can look at it and just say, shut up and move on. So, all right.
And I think one of the biggest differences between maybe some of your experiences on projects, what you might find outside of a dam structure is, and another way to kind of look at it would be, if you were to put in manufacturing facility inside of a building, but all you could see is the envelope on the outside.
Mhm.
But you have to design all the equipment to fit the interior, and you don't know the dimensions or how the interior is laid out.
Mhm.
But you need to get it 100% correct. You need to get that assembly line built and installed inside that warehouse when all you can see is steel sheeting on the outside of that, and you can't see the inside.
Mhm.
It's basically what we have when we're dealing with a dam,
Yeah.
right? We don't know all the facts about the inside of the structure. We only know some of them. We can only explore limited subsurface information can be gathered about where the structure is sitting. We don't know all of it because we haven't removed the
Mhm.
top, so to speak, taken a look at that, or gone into the building and explored the entire inside of the building, 100% of the inside of the building. So we do our best to, based on our industry understanding, practices, and experience, to guess at what the condition will be on the inside of the structure, what it will require.
Mhm.
And then it's, in order to compensate for the inability to be able to collect 100% of the data, our contracts are written in unit rates more than a lump sum.
Mhm.
Because there may invariably be a need to put more concrete in, or grout in, or in the case of Indian Lake, additional repointing when we are able to actually explore the structure and investigate the structure, which we previously couldn't see other than from the outside envelope. And so those unit rates cover those particular pieces of work that need to be completed.
Yeah.
And that even though we didn't see, we needed to complete them. And they need to be completed in order to make the project whole.
Mhm.
We may not have quantified that work 100%. We did our best to quantify the work based on what we could see, but the unit rate allows us to put in that material and agreed upon price in the volume or the quantity that is actually needed, even though we weren't able to quantify it from the outside view. And as long as we're satisfied that the unit rate is appropriate and reasonable for the amount of work, for the type of work that's being done, at least I am happy with moving forward with the project, because ultimately, whether I say or the engineer says it's going to be 700 cubic yards of material or 1,000 linear feet of another material, if the reality is, even though we weren't able to see inside the envelope, that we need more than that in order to accomplish the project and complete it the way we need it completed, I have a unit rate that covers me, and I've spent no more than what I would have needed to spend had I the ability to look inside the envelope and understand 100% of the volume going into the construction project.
But it could cost exponentially more
Well, that's the
to
other,
come up with that
right, to
answer.
take the top off, so
Certainty
to speak,
certainty is expensive.
or to get certainty, right?
But either way,
We're-
you're spending, you have to spend the money you have to spend.
Right.
Once you figure out what the volume
Sure,
is.
we just don't know that, right,
We think we know what the volume is likely to be,
right.
But to find
experience
out with 100% certainty what the volume would be
Is difficult, very
is
difficult.
difficult and way more expensive than simply
Sure.
finding out later that the volume was 10% more than you thought it was gonna be.
Right.
Or 40% more than you thought it was gonna be.
You know, you guys, I'm okay with the volume part because I think that's a good approach. That's not gonna hurt anybody, one way or the other, when you do it the volume approach. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah.
That to me makes a lot of sense because I don't know what I got until I get in there and stuff, and it's the way to do that.
Sure.
But Rob, just from the standpoint, I don't want to get into a big thing on this, but I've never gone into a project where there's been 100%. And even when that shell's in there and you can walk it and go through it and stuff, once you start getting into it, and it's an older plant or something like that, you find all sorts of things that you didn't know going into a project. And that's why you've got contingent. So I'm kind of used to things that, you know, that are wrong and aren't right, and you don't have, and nowhere near the amount of engineering. Like, I mean, there's not money usually for a project to do the type of engineering we're doing. There really isn't. And so you find out all
Well,
the,
and then there's the biggest difference between your experience and our experience.
Yeah.
right? An enormous amount of engineering has to go.
Has to
into
be.
the structures.
yeah, I understand that and I understand why. And it's a good we do. So I'm okay with that part. It just, I'm not used to projects going this far over. And it just feels like to me, from my viewpoint, if this was my dollars, I would be looking at, and I try to look at it because I think that's one of the things you guys told me when I came on the board is look at this as like your dollars are going on. I look at it and say, boy, just something doesn't seem right. Somebody seems like, and I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about the engineering or firm or the contractors coming in. You know, it seems like somebody's not doing their work right, and
I don't
it
think
doesn't
it's that
seem.
no one's doing their work right, or someone's not doing their work right. It's a case of not spending the extra $1 million to de-water the gatehouse at Indian Lake in order to investigate it fully. Right? We could, prior to a $10 million job, we'd have to go through the process of engineering and designing and contracting in order to do sufficient investigation to determine that the extra $7 million is needed at that gatehouse. That would have, one, lengthened the project by years, right? And two, added whatever that cost might be to complete that dewatering just in order to get the investigation done, in order to determine more closely the 100% of the work that needs to be done as compared to the estimates that the engineer gives us based on the observations without having to go through that process. But this is one example of avoiding that engineering and construction costs. Right? So you'd have engineering and construction to dewater to determine that you need to spend $7 million. And instead, we have a contractor on the site that they basically saved us the effort that I previously described because they're investigating it while they're completing the repairs, which we've already included in the contract. And then, in this case, move forward with that work.
But let me add to that.
It would be a project in and of itself, just to do the level of investigation that would be necessary, with a structure that's 40 feet below the water and needs dewatering just to do the thorough and full investigation of it.
So let me just add to that, if I can, Mr. Reagan, that it wasn't simply a guess that we don't think we need the gatehouse foundation work. That was based on exterior investigatory work that allowed us to make what was a reasonable engineering assumption, I believe, on the condition of the gatehouse from the interior, which didn't hold up. You know, that decision didn't prove to be correct. So this is additional, and this isn't work that the contractor had bid on originally and said, oh boy, this is going to cost us a lot more. It's work that simply wasn't included in the project.
Right.
And the last thing I just want to note, just from a sort of a housekeeping standpoint, and Tim, Anicha, if you've said this already, forgive me, but this item doesn't seek any new money. It simply moves, reappropriates money from the last fiscal year, which was already intended to be spent, the original scope of the project, into the current fiscal year. If I've got that right, Tim.
Yes.
Yeah, this is principally about timing.
But we will get into the looking for more money later on in the meeting. I don't want to disappoint anybody.
If you think of it this way, the project costs X. X is a constant. And you just don't know what X is yet. You can find out by letting the contract and spending the necessary monies to complete the project, resulting in X. Or you can spend money on Y, which is the investigatory phase, which then is added to X at the end of the project. Or really, I guess it's the beginning of the cost. So the total cost of the project is X and Y. The amount you spend on Y will give you certainty as to what X is earlier in the process, but it doesn't change what X is.
Yeah, you guys, I was responsible for, $100 million worth of capital a year of going on. So I'm pretty familiar with this stuff of going on and a lot of different changes. I would ask you to take a look at if there's any process improvements, and then if you could report back after you look at it. I actually think, a session with the contractor at the end, and also with the person who did the engineering, of the three of them, sitting down and saying, okay, what can we learn from this? How do we get it closer on the next one? Because with three different companies I work for, if I continually miss 3 projects in a row to this level, I would not have a job. That simple. Because it's all based on return of going on in those projects. And that would not be acceptable to their board of directors of going through. And I'm not saying that to be mean or anything. I'm just saying that's reality. And we live in a different reality of going on. So all I would ask, and I think it's reasonable, let's sit down, have a debrief with and let's really try to get some lessons learned before we start hitting the next one to say what we can do. I mean, this is the taxpayers' money of New York. I don't want to get preaching or anything, and it just seems like maybe this is the way it is. I don't know, but it's not my world. It's different in my world. I'll say that, and God knows nobody wants to be in that world. So there's a lot better worlds to be in. All right. I'm done.
Well, John and I met on this very subject. And my question is, why do we even put it out to bid?
That's
I
great.
mean, I could bid $1, get a contract and do the change orders, but again, some of what's been said here, you discussed with me, and I understand it a little better.
Well, like the gatehouses, if we went out to the people we contracted and said, hey, you got to tell us what the gatehouses are because we don't know. Because I know we didn't have a lot of people bidding on them because there was probably too many unknowns or they didn't want to get stuck with something. I don't know. But that's why I'm thinking there's something there. All right, so that's going to shut up. It's nice out.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, may I have a motion to authorize to the full board the recommend adoption of a resolution to reauthorize reapportions for capital
You've got to
projects
make it.
to the tune of $4,394,091.
I'll make that motion.
Shays,
Second?
you want to say that?
Yeah.
Good.
All in
Mr.
favor?
Hood.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. May I have a motion to adjourn the financial?
I'll make that motion.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved.
I'd like to call to order the full board meeting for July. Call to order. Roll call, Mr. Leslie.
Board Chair Mark Finkel.
Here.
First Vice Chair Kenneth DeWitt. Here. Board members Albert Hayes.
Here.
Timothy Reagan.
Here.
Board member Richard Byrd.
Here.
Board member Nicole Allen.
Here.
Mr. Alfred Candido is excused. Executive Director John Callahan.
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie here. Chief Engineer Robert Fulton.
Here.
Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Minicha.
Here.
Director of Administrative Services Stephanie Rizicki.
Here.
Everybody is accounted for.
Thank you. I need a motion to adopt the meeting agenda. No need for executive session.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Mr.
Okay.
Hayes, Mr. DeWitt.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have no guests that I'm aware of. Public comment. Anybody either online or there's nobody in the room have any public comment? Want to address the board?
I have not got notification from anyone that they would like to comment today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next is approval of the June 10th, 25 regular board meeting minutes. We've all read them. We have a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. DeWitt.
A second. All in favor?
Mr. Byrd.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next, the report of our executive director, Mr. Callahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report appears on pages 20 and 21 of your board packet. I'll note it also includes a summary of our customer satisfaction survey, which was live for approximately 3 months this year. I thank Mr. Reagan for working with me and Megan Cole for working with us to finalize this and get it out there. We had over 350 respondents, so we thought that was a very positive response. And again, in terms of process improvement, we've got some things to take away. Certainly on getting the number up on people who understand what they can and can't do on state land under our jurisdiction around Great Sacandaga Lake. The vast majority of respondents were permit holders on Great Sacandaga Lake. The vast majority of those respondents had utilized the online permit system for renewal and liked it. So we've got some good affirmation there, but also some work ahead. And as Mr. Reagan knows, because we worked on this together, ran the customer satisfaction survey at New York State Canals for many years. We did those every 2 years, so we could ask the same or similar questions and really measure our performance in those areas, and that's the plan here as well. So glad to pause in a moment or two and take any questions on that. Also know I included in my report the memo to the board covering Budget Bulletin D 1153, which prescribes 3% performance increases for MC represented employees, non-union represented employees here at the regulating district, and other covered agencies and authorities. The board adopted the state's schedule for those advances 10 years ago in 2015. So when the Division of Budget published those following passage of the budget each year, we adopt those as well. Also not included in my report, just to note the tragedies over the weekend in Texas along the Guadalupe River. Certainly been talking quite a bit with the chief engineer on this. I also want to note that downstream of the most affected area, Canyon Lake is a reservoir built and operated by the Army Corps of Engineers for flood protection, similar to the reservoirs under our jurisdiction, and that successfully stored all that additional inflow, preventing loss of life and other damage downstream of that storage reservoir. So just as tragic as that event was, and we continue to learn more and more every day with seems like an ever-increasing fatality total coming out of that event. Also an important reminder, I think, of how important the work we do is, and certainly not something that's lost on us.
Could you imagine if that reservoir wasn't there?
The inflow, not a record event, as I think the chief engineer will also point out, some very unique topography in that area. But yes, that, I think you would have seen the devastation that you saw upstream continue to play out.
That would have been like Susquehanna during that hurricane that came, what, 1972? It started
Was that Agnes?
Agnes, started in Corning and went right all the way down through to the Chesapeake Bay.
So certainly a tragedy. And then, of course, as I've communicated to the board, another tragedy right here on Great Sacandaga Lake over the weekend, another individual not wearing a PFD, losing a life. We've talked a lot following the tragedy of just a couple of weeks ago with our Safe Lake Initiative partners, looking to emphasize the resources that are available, like our Life Jacket Loaner Station just outside the door here and other loaner stations around the reservoir. We've hosted a couple of, as the board knows, boater safety courses here this year to get everybody who wants to operate a vessel through that course is required now for everybody under Brianna's law. And we want to continue to work with our partners like local law enforcement who were able to respond quickly for both incidents right out of this facility, thanks to the expanded docking facility that the board approved just a few years ago. So we continue to play an active role, but the key is we've got to convince people that whenever they're out on the water, they need to be wearing a PFD and take other appropriate measures. But as sad as that is, we'll continue to work and try and make this and other bodies of water under our jurisdiction and elsewhere as safe as we can as part of the safe boating community. So with that, I'll just pause for any questions that the board members may have.
There was also a drowning in Lake George.
Yes.
Had that girl that with a Sea-Doo, did she have it kind of, when I read that article, it sounded like she may not have had that training.
I don't want to attest to it, personally, because I don't know Mr. Reagan, but certainly as I interpret the sheriff's remarks, talking about the lack of PFDs and also the course.
Yeah.
I had the same conclusion that she probably had not had that course.
Yeah.
But again, that's just my interpretation and doesn't represent any.
I
personal
hope if
knowledge.
she didn't, they make, without making a point with her, but just the importance of somebody having that instead of just anybody can ride one of those things.
Yeah, and I think-
Especially after a case of beer.
So what I do every time there's a course here, Mr. Reagan, I go down and introduce myself. Teresa Craig also, has had a family tragedy of her own and is so prominent with the Safe Lake Initiative effort, will also speak. But what I say is, and you invariably you get people who are not thrilled about having to sit through this course. I've been boating all my life. I've been boating for 50 years.
Yeah.
And I always say I'm a licensed professional mariner. I still hold my Coast Guard ticket. And every time I'm on the water, every time I hear these instructors just sit in with the class for 20 or 30 minutes, I either learn something new or I am reminded of something important. So I think that's just, if you don't think you have anything left to learn on the water, I probably don't want to go boating with you.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Any other questions?
Hey, John, just a question on the merit increase. That's 3% across the board. Is that how it's
It
done?
is.
There's no merit based on there's no opportunity to give based on individual performance.
So the division of budget process requires, and Mr. Minichia will correct me if I get this wrong, for any
I saw
agency or
underperforming.
authority, to submit a memo of non-performance for any case where you want to withhold that advance. Is that right, Tim?
Correct.
And we did not.
So basically, it's a across the board the way.
Very good. Any other questions? Thank you, Joe. Next, we're moving on to contract actions. First one is a resolution authorizing a 3-year subscription for AutoCAD through DLT Solutions for an amount not to exceed $7,216.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The memo was found on page 37 of the board packet, and the resolution is on 38. We have previously had 2 licenses of AutoCAD for 2 of our staff members. Prior to this year, The cost of the subscription was below the $5,000 threshold. It is now at $7,200.26, which requires board approval. I'll pause for any questions. If not, we would ask for your permission to go ahead and purchase this.
Any discussion? Motion,
I'll make it.
second,
Second.
Mr. Regan, Mr. DeWitt.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, resolution to increase project budget for contract D 012023 with CD Perry for additional work on the Indian Lake Dam.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm on as the technical advisor on that resolution. Partially previously discussed and mentioned contract D01-2023 with CD Perry at Indian Lake. Required to increase the amount of $7,491,519 for total contract value not to exceed $18,326,379.17. That difference covers the emergent and new foundation work identified at the gatehouse structure. And happy to answer any questions you might have. I'm sure Tim and or John will also be able to supplement you with information.
Yeah, I think just to tee up Mr. Minicha on that part of the conversation, to the extent members have questions and there's further discussion. I just want to note Tim's continued success in making the case to our colleagues up the street, both in the executive chamber and division of budget, that with our funding model, these generational investments are not easily made or easily fit into our existing funding model. So when we have new work, emergent work that is critical to be completed, the state has a vested interest in assisting with that. And to that end, Tim Minicha's handed out, I think, a pretty good visual aid to help tell that story. But culminating in the good news that he was able to pass along after passage of the state budget this year. I don't know if is 78, 79 million accurate, Tim?
Yes.
In total capital funding appropriated by the state of New York for generational, again, as to Mr. Reagan's earlier point, these are not projects that we'll be revisiting in a few years. These are projects where we have 100-plus-year-old infrastructure, which is being fully rehabilitated for the first time in its lifetime. So these generational improvements and enhancements and rehabilitation projects will ensure that, again, going back to the conversation about the devastating flooding in Texas over the weekend, that we can perform our critically important flood protection role for generations to come. So that's all I wanted to add to that. And Tim, I'm sure, can do a yeoman's job talking through the visual aid here.
Sure, just to talk a little bit about the chart, we've tried to illustrate kind of different elements of the construction side of the project. So this is construction only, does not include the cost of engineering because the amendment is a construction amendment. And so originally 10.8 million, of which we would finance through EFC a little over 10 million and do $781,000 on a pay-as-you-go basis. As the project evolved, there was a need for change orders and substitutions totaling nearly 1.8 million. I should say that that is a net number. The total increases were a little over 3 million, but we did find, when I say we, I mean Rob, and partners did identify $1.3 million in savings to offset the $3 million additional cost, and that's how you get to the 1.776 million. With respect to the CD Perry proposal for the Gatehouse Foundation work, 4.9 million hearing clearly, consistently, the importance of contingency included is part of this resolution. A request of an additional $780,000 to cover prospective changes that happen as we enter this next phase. And you add those two together and you get to the $5.7 million not to exceed that we seek as this in this resolution. And I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has about any of that.
Any questions or comments? If not, a motion. A motion to expend the additional funds. A motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Hayes, Mr. Tillman.
Any further discussion, comments? Oh, if not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Or abstentions? Next, we'll move on to staff and committee reports. Mr. Leslie, General Counsel.
I think we have Finance Committee first.
I thought we just did. Sorry.
Report out of.
No, my fault. Finance committee, Mr. Moore.
Resolution to authorize reappropriation for capital projects in the amount of $4,394,095. We've already discussed that, so.
Motion to expend that?
I'll make it.
Second,
That was second.
Mr. Hayes.
further discussion,
Sorry.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now we'll move to committee reports. General Counsel, Mr. Leslie.
My report is on page 41. Mr. Callahan and I will have, will shortly, host representatives from the General Recoveries Unit of the OAG's Civil Recovery Bureau at a site visit to the Conkaville Dam to discuss the commencement of our affirmative case seeking redress against Erie Boulevard Hydropower. In light of Erie Council's failure to respond, the OAG has ceased attempts to engage Erie's outside counsel and to discuss a meaningful resolution of this dispute. The unpaid amount, Erie's unpaid obligation, is now in excess of $5 million. Basically been 2 years that they have not paid us. And the Bureau, meaning the Civil Recoveries Bureau, has continued to indicate a willingness to move forward with its summons and complaint. Tomorrow's, or I guess Thursday's, site visit is in furtherance of their information gathering stage.
Are you gonna ask them at what date they're gonna assume? I mean, is that something you can ask them? Can they give them a time frame of when?
When they're likely to file that suit?
Mhm.
We did in a roundabout manner.
Mhm.
And their answer was that the statute of limitations for one of the claims that they intend to bring is 3 years, which would be 3 years from June 30th of 2023, which would be next June 30th. So it will be before then. I hope it will be well before then, closer to today's date than that. But from a legal standpoint, they've given us their answer.
And I think we'd want to go into executive session to discuss the details, but there are other steps that they are taking that are necessary to proceed that step.
That's true. The village of Northville is happy with us as we have presented them with a deed to the lands underlying the causeway that the Hunter Creek Dam that creates Little Lake. They provided us with a survey. The survey gave us the description. The description became part of the deed. The executive director signed the deed, and we delivered that up to village's outside council, or the village's council. He has indicated that there are a couple of follow-up tax and finance documents to be filed, which they will prepare and present to us for our signature. That has not happened yet, but short of that, we're pretty far along in this process. Our outside counsel for our insurance carrier continues to engage in discovery regarding the personal injury accident fallen on Mason on the Indian Ridge Rehab Project. There was a deposition for the executive director scheduled that has, to my knowledge,
It's been rescheduled.
rescheduled. And that is the sum and substance of my report. Available for any questions.
Any questions or comments? Thank you. Next, Director of Administrative Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report is located on page 42 of the board packet and details my activities during the preceding month. A couple items worth noting. I performed the quarterly compliance audit of the Black River area office. The audits are performed to verify our internal controls are functioning as intended. No weaknesses or deficiencies were identified. I'm pleased to report that we have hired a seasonal worker for our Continental Dam location. He'll be working with Eric Johnson, our principal plant operator, and it's very helpful to us to have him here during our busy summer season. The contract status reports are on page 43 to 45. They are included for your review to satisfy the public authority requirements. Pause for any questions. If not, that completes my report.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can find the CFO report on page 46 of your packet. Since we've spoken about financial issues for much of the meeting, let me just call your attention to a portion of my summary indicating that the regulating district has succeeded in finalizing the insurance program for the July 1, 2025, June 30, 2026 period, thanks to the determined effort of the Office of General Services, Bureau of Risk and Insurance Management, and representatives of Arthur J. Gallagher. The remaining coverage, which was umbrella or excess liability coverage, was obtained. The final cost, including the fee to OGS, will be $373,208, representing an increase from the current fiscal year of a little over $72,000 or 24%. It is also well within the not to exceed amount of $415,000 adopted by the board at its June 10th, 2025 meeting. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about this or any other aspect of the regulated district financials.
Any questions? We do have some board member expenses.
Indeed, we do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to call your attention to the signed affidavit you can find on page 68. The package lists necessary and reasonable expenses incurred by a board member relating to his participation in the May board meeting. Article 3, Section 2 of the regulated district's bylaws require the board to approve payment before any reimbursement can be made. Before asking you for that motion, Mr. Chair, let me offer to answer any questions anybody has about this affidavit of these expenses.
Any questions? Need a motion to accept?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Next, Chief Engineer, Mr. Plunkett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report on reservoir operation June begins on page 70. We continue to track fairly closely, if not exactly, along drawdown curves at all of the reservoirs, or in the case of Old Fortune 6 Lake, continue to maintain on target the summer reservoir elevation, first through 7th Lake. And I don't anticipate any events in the next few weeks or so that will cause us to deviate from that track. Included also at the end of my reports, a summary on continued work at Indian Lake, the activities that have taken place in construction over the last month or so. And I'm also pleased to announce that last week we advertised, on June 20th, we advertised the Old Fortune 6 Lake Rehabilitation Project, and we'll meet tomorrow with prospective contractors. Hopefully, a bid on the project, bids which are due on August 15th in our office in Albany. I got, answer any questions?
If Mr. Reagan were to want to participate in that meeting, it would
The
be
pre-bid meeting,
10 o'clock at
10 o'clock at Old Forge tomorrow.
I've let on to Mr. Byrd also that that's taking place.
Yeah.
No news.
Or 11 o'clock at 6 Lake, following pre-bid meeting at Old Forge.
And I think the early response from the number of firms that have downloaded plans from the contract reporter and have reached out relative to the pre-bid site visit is that we may see a healthy amount of competition on this one.
Well, we're hopeful. There are 3 or 4 construction firms who have indicated that they would be present at the pre-bid meeting.
Rob, I won't be there.
Okay. But we, Indian Lake, we also had 3 or 4.
Sure.
And we ended up with only 2 bids at Indian Lake. Hawkinsville, we had 3 or 4, and ended with 1. Was it
Other way around.
2? Okay, sorry.
No, just.
Yes,
since we
thank you for the
mentioned
correction.
so much about it.
Yes. Yep. So, yeah. Hopefully 3 or 4 will decide to bid.
Any questions or comments? Thank you. Any other board member questions or comments? Anything anybody wants to bring up? Okay, we need a resolution for our next board meeting, which is September 9th. Please note there is no August meeting. September 9th, and I want to ask everybody, I have suggested Albany. Does that mean, is that a problem for anybody? I just think we should go down and see the main office, and the Albany office.
Mr. Chairman, we will have the meeting open in this room as well for anybody who can't make it to Albany for whatever reason.
I need a motion for the next board meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
A second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now I need a motion for adjournment.
I'll make that motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.